Okay, welcome back to the 63 again. As you can see, the engine is out. It's actually here on the bench because I'm going to try and get this clutch sorted once and for all. I think what's happened this time is the rear main seal has failed. There's oil everywhere, you can just see it all there. So I'm going to clean all that up, change the seal, but I'm also going to try something else with the clutch. I've got a new clutch in that box there, which is different to the one that was on it previously. So I'll get this cleaned up and I'll show you what's happening with the new clutch. Right, this engine is what's called a water boxer out of a VW T3 Transporter. It's basically a Type 4 engine with the cooling jacket on. You can see the cooling jackets there and there. So that means it takes a Type 4 flywheel with the five bolts holding onto the crank. Now, what was fitted in the past was what's called a conversion flywheel, which allows a Type 4 engine to run a Type 1 Beetle clutch because they're smaller diameter but much more readily available. So what we've got here then is a conversion flywheel which takes a 200mm clutch, a 200mm Kennedy Stage 3 pressure plate, and that is a Daikin Super Disc which is worn out, contaminated. But it's all 200mm or 8 inches. Stock, this engine would have had 228mm, which is about 9 inches. So I've got a 228mm flywheel, a stock 228mm cover plate, which I'm hoping will be strong enough to deal with that, a custom made 5-paddle Cerametallic 228mm disc. Now, the flywheel will fit the engine, no problem, but it will also fit in the bell housing because this bell housing is also from a T3. So it's big enough to take a 228mm clutch and flywheel. I've got a new release bearing, which is actually also contaminated with oil. So I'll change that. New crankshaft seal, new O-ring to go inside the flywheel. So hopefully that'll be okay and keep it all nice and clean and dry. And hopefully it'll work. Now the thinking behind this is a bigger disc, 228mm, is actually 20% bigger than a 200mm because of maths. So with the friction material on that, I'm hoping that the extra diameter and the friction material will be enough for this stock pressure plate to deal with. If not, I can get an uprated pressure plate made, but either way it's still going to need that disc. So it made sense to get that disc made first to try it. If that pressure plate doesn't hold that disc, I'll get a new pressure plate, flywheel will stay the same. So that's the plan, stick it all in and hopefully it'll work. Actually, while the engine's out and before I do that, there's a couple of other things I want to do. The turbo oil feed comes from the stock oil pressure location down there. I think I put that in a previous video. Goes up through this connector here to this oil pressure switch and then up to feed the turbo at the top there. The trouble is, this is a very high flow rate of oil, but it's not high pressure because it's flowing through, passing through the turbo and then falling back into the crankcase again. So this pressure switch here is giving me false low readings, so I'm going to delete it. So I've got a replacement for this that'll just bypass it completely, take the switch out, and then I'll run with just the idiot light instead. That'll be fine, I think. The oil pressure gauge is just something else to worry about anyway. So yeah, so I'll do that. A couple of other things I want to do, including making better brackets for the injector rails because I'm not happy with the way they're secured on there. And there was something else, I can't remember what that is, I'll come to me later. Oh yeah, that was it. I'm going to relocate the fuel pressure regulator onto the end of this rail. It's currently mounted on the inner wing up there with that short length of pipe, and I don't like that. So I'm just going to mount it straight on the end there instead. So yeah, I'll change that first I think, because that's the easiest thing to do. So this, if it focuses, there we are, is the oil pressure sender adapter. It's just -4 to -4 with a screw-in port for the sender. I'm going to replace it with this thing, which is just a straightforward -4 male to -4 male, just to connect these together there and there. So that's done, nice and easy. I'm pretty sure that old thing was leaking as well, so this hopefully will resolve that problem too. There was oil all on the back of the cylinder head here. which I've cleaned off when I cleaned all that up. So that's done. Next thing to do is clean off these flywheel bolts because they've got thread lock all over them. Stick the flywheel on and then check the end floats, because obviously different flywheel could have different end floats. I've got a new shim for it to go in there, so I'll check that next and then we'll see what happens then. Right, flywheel on, end float checked, so it can all come off again now. It doesn't need the extra shim putting in there, but it does need the O-ring in the back of the flywheel still, and it also needs the new seal putting on as well. Also, I'm not happy about this hole here. There should be a sensor in there. I didn't really think it was such a problem, but it seems to be a source of getting some oil in. So I'm going to try and figure out some way of blocking that off, I think. I don't know what I'm going to do with that yet. I don't think I've got any blind grommets big enough to block that off. Might leave that as a problem for future Steve, but we'll see what happens. I'll get this off first and do the rest of it anyway. Actually, before I take that off, I'm going to make sure that the new clutch disc clears those flywheel bolts. Pick it up without getting it greasy, because they might need grinding down a bit. Yeah, you probably can't see, but I can. There's tons of clearance there, that's all good. Don't need to worry about that. Right, excellent. Take it all off and stick the seal in. Okay, that's the flywheel fitted with the new seal, the new O-ring, all greased up and oiled and everything. Put the pilot bearing in the end of the crankshaft where it should be. All nice and clean. I've cleaned it with a brake cleaner. So the next thing now is just give the pressure plate a bit of a clean as well, and then bolt that on. And then that should be the clutch done. There's other things to do to the engine, of course, but that's the clutch done at least. So I've got the clutch all fitted, it's all torqued up nicely, the engine spins freely, so that's all good. We're going to call that done, it's all aligned and everything, so ready to go. I have relocated the fuel pressure regulator onto this fuel rail here. I might look at making a bracket. I've undone these bolts to try and consider making a bracket, but it is dead solid anyway. Look, if I wobble that, the whole engine's moving, so I'm pretty sure that's secure enough. But I'll try and figure something out. Maybe off this exhaust stud or this plate up here or something. I'll figure something out. But the heat wrap on this J-tube here, this part of the exhaust, was all blackened round here. So I've just taken it apart, and I don't know if you can see that, but that weld is broken. So this tube has to come off and get welded. It's got a flange there, and it fastens onto the head there, so it's no biggie. Take that off, get it welded up on the bench. And then that should be that. I thought it was getting noisy, and that seems to be why. So yeah, we'll get that off, get that fixed, and then I think the engine can go back in. Yeah, clutch is on, that's done, that needs doing. That's all that needed doing when the engine was out. I've checked the condition of this fuel line here, this one that goes from this fuel rail over the top of the engine and down to there. That's all fine. The heat protection is working nicely on that, so that's good. Yeah, let's get that exhaust off and get it welded. Right, I've got the exhaust off. I have welded it in two places. There was a join there and a join there, both of which were almost completely apart. So I welded it up, re-wrapped it. I'm not showing you the welds. Let's just say it's welded and leave it at that, because it's yeah, it's not the best welding in the world, but it'll do. It's only to stop the gases coming out. So that's it, it's all back on. I've just managed to break this bolt, or the one to the side, so I need to get another bolt through there. But I'm going to call it a day for now. I will return tomorrow and do a bit more, and maybe get the engine back in tomorrow. Okay, it's the next day, and having slept on it, I'm not happy with this just being on that one mount there. So I'm going to make a little bracket, a little brace from there to there, probably one from there to there, just to hold this fuel rail in place. Fast forward a few hours, engine's back in. There is the little bracket that I made to secure the fuel rail, so that's all good. Everything's connected up, battery reconnected, won't start. The the engine won't turn over at all. Now it was turning over on the bench, so it's not seized, so it must be an interference problem with the clutch. Probably with the clutch and the starter motor, possibly the clutch and the bell housing, but I don't think it's the bell housing because the engine actually went on okay and it's bolted up tight. So I think the starter motor is the issue. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the starter motor out and then see if the engine turns over. If it does, I'll have to figure out what to do about that next. If it doesn't, then the engine and the bell housing have to come out and I'll have to clearance them. So fingers crossed it's a simple fix. Well, it wasn't the starter motor, so the engine's out again, and it looks like it just needs the bell housing clearancing there, 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 and there. Luckily though, the bell housing is separate to the gearbox, and the gearbox is hung off the roll cage, so I can take the bell housing off, no problem, put it on the engine on the floor there, and keep grinding bits off the bell housing so it clearances it, and then hopefully that won't be too big of a problem. Here we go. Right, did that. There's the engine back in again. It now turns over freely, but not with this starter motor in. I think this is a Beetle starter motor. It's got quite a big collar there, and the gear is quite close to it. But if we look at this new one that I've got here, get that out. You can see, if I put them sort of side by side so you can see them, the collar thing on the old one is much bigger than this one, and the gear is completely different. It's got this like little step in it. I think this is a Beetle gear starter. This is definitely a T3 starter, so I'm going to put this in and see if that cures it. Okay, just to finish this video off, when I was editing it, I discovered that I didn't have any footage I could actually use of refitting the starter motor and test drives and so on. So anyway, I had to space the starter motor out by about 10mm to make it clear properly. It now works perfectly, there's no grinding noises, the engine spins over freely without touching anything, so that's all great. The clutch itself is a tiny bit aggressive, but it's not bad at all. You can definitely feel when it's engaged, but you can still sort of manoeuvre the car slowly and pull out of junctions and so on. It's not like an on-off switch, so that's really good. I'm pleased with that. I have put a few miles on the car just to try and get the clutch bedded in, given it a couple of sort of full power pulls in first and second and third, and so far the clutch isn't slipping at all, which is great news. So all that remains now is to finish off a few little jobs. I've got to fit a fuel gauge, refit the under trays under the engine and so on, and then we're ready for street weekend, which is actually only about a month away. Yeah, a lot to do still, but we're getting there. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you like this, click the like button, ring the bell and all that kind of stuff. Leave comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much. Oh, but before I go, admire or revel in the glory of my new centre caps. Look at that, marvellous. Right, see you later, bye.